Why would any man waste a dance on her?
Trevor Hamilton raised his glass with a smug grin. Every boy in tuxedos burst into laughter. Savannah Ashford, 18, paralyzed, the billionaire's only daughter, froze as a tear slid down her cheek.
Look at her, boys!
Then a black serving boy stepped forward, jaw tight, eyes burning.
Miss Ashford is not paralyzed. Dislocated L1 vertebra, pinched sciatic nerve. 12 hospitals missed it.
Trevor snarled.
Shut your mouth! Somebody get the help out of here!
Across the ballroom, the billionaire father shot up from his chair, as if catching the last flicker of hope after 2 long years. And the boy never imagined those few words would change both their lives forever. 3 months earlier, on a gray February morning in Charleston, South Carolina, a county van rolled up the gravel drive of Bellwood Preparatory Academy. The school had stood for 200 years on a hill above the Ashley River. Ivy on its walls, oak doors thicker than a man's arm, the names of senators and oil heirs carved into brass plaques in the library. Out of the van stepped a tall, thin black boy in a thrift store coat, carrying 1 duffel bag and a small wooden case that looked, to the casual eye, like it might hold a violin. His name was Wesley Williams. He was 18 years old, an orphan from St. Augustine's Home for Boys, and the only scholarship student in Bellwood's senior class. Coach Lawrence Moore, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a Marine's haircut, met him at the steps. "Welcome, son. Dining hall serves the staff first, kitchen entrance on the left. Don't take it personal. That's just how things are around here." Wesley nodded once. He didn't take it personal. He had spent most of his life not taking things personal. His mornings began at 4:30. He set tables in the dining hall before sunrise, refilled water carafes during breakfast, polished silverware between classes, served punch at school functions, and washed dishes until midnight on weekends. He spoke quietly. He kept his head down. He did not socialize. The other boys called him the ghost, or sometimes worse, and walked through him in hallways as if his body did not occupy space. He never complained. He never asked for help. And every night, before he turned out the light in the narrow scholarship dorm on the 4th floor, he touched a small silver locket that hung around his neck, and he whispered the same 2 words. "Good night, Mama." The janitor, an old man named Walter Brown, once swore he heard music from the locked music conservatory at 2 o'clock in the morning. A Viennese waltz, played on a single piano, soft and certain. The kind of music a man plays when he is talking to a ghost. Coach Moore told the janitor to forget what he heard. The janitor did, but he sometimes wondered what kind of orphan plays Strauss at 2 in the morning, and where, exactly, a boy with 1 duffel bag had learned the difference between a real violin and a case that only pretended to hold one. Savannah Ashford was a different kind of ghost. 2 years before that February morning, she had been the brightest girl in Charleston society, a competitive equestrian, a junior debate champion, a debutante in training. She rode her father's prize thoroughbred, a chestnut stallion named Carolina Sky, in the regional dressage finals at the Aiken Hunt Club. The horse spooked at a thunderclap. Savannah went over the rail. Her father reached her 30 seconds later and found her conscious, but unable to feel her legs. She was 16 years old. In the 2 years since, her father, Harrison Ashford III, CEO of Ashford Industries, owner of half of Charleston's medical supply patents, friend to 2 governors and 1 former president, had spent over $32 million trying to give his daughter back her legs. Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Spine Center, Stanford, UCLA, the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Charité in Berlin, the Royal London Hospital, 12 hospitals across 3 continents, 12 teams of the most decorated neurosurgeons alive, 12 identical conclusions. Permanent spinal cord trauma, lower body paralysis, no surgical or non-surgical intervention recommended. Patient should be supported in adjusting to lifelong use of mobility aids. Savannah stopped speaking for 4 months after the 7th diagnosis. She stopped riding. She stopped dancing. And she had been, before the fall, the kind of dancer her ballet instructor had said would one day perform at Lincoln Center. She withdrew from her friends. She read books in the corner of every room. Her mother, Margaret Ashford, watched the brightness in her daughter's eyes fade like a candle in a draught and prayed every Sunday at St. Michael's Episcopal Church for a miracle her own faith was no longer sure existed. When Margaret proposed the 18th birthday debutante ball at Ashford Manor, 400 guests, the full orchestra, the silver gown, the chandeliers, Harrison resisted. Savannah resisted harder. But Margaret begged with tears in her eyes. "Please, sweetheart, just one night, just to remind the world you're still here." Savannah agreed, because her mother cried, and because somewhere deep beneath the silence, a part of her still wanted, desperately, secretly, to be invited back into her own life. She did not know that the boy who would invite her was, at that exact moment, 3 miles away in a thrift store coat, ironing a borrowed tuxedo and whispering good night to a locket. She did not know that the senator's son who had once been her boyfriend, the boy who had stopped visiting her hospital room after the second week, was already drafting in his head the cruelest sentence ever spoken in a ballroom in the state of South Carolina. The ballroom of Ashford Manor on the night of January 24th looked like something out of a Henry James novel. 3 baccarat chandeliers, each one shipped from Paris in 1847, burned with a soft golden light over a parquet floor of walnut and cherry, laid by hand in the year George Washington died. Magnolia blossoms floated in crystal bowls along the perimeter. A 12-piece orchestra, in white tie, tuned beneath an oil portrait of Harrison Ashford I. 400 guests, senators, surgeons, oil heirs, 2 governors, the wife of a Supreme Court justice, drank Veuve Clicquot from etched flutes and pretended, with the practiced grace of the very rich, that they did not notice the girl in the silver gown at the edge of the dance floor. Savannah sat in her wheelchair beside the orchestra. Her mother had spent 2 hours that afternoon arranging her hair into a French chignon, fastening pearl drops to her ears, smoothing the silver silk over her motionless knees. Margaret had told her in the mirror, "You look like a queen, sweetheart." Savannah had tried to smile. The smile had not reached her eyes. The first waltz began. Couples paired off. Margaret bent down to Savannah's ear. "I see Daniel Wilson over there. He used to be in your chemistry class. Let me ask him." Savannah caught her mother's sleeve. "Mom, please don't." But Margaret was already crossing the floor. Daniel Wilson, 18, blonde, son of an investment banker, looked at Margaret, looked over her shoulder at Savannah, and looked at his shoes. "I'd love to, Mrs. Ashford, really, but I already promised this one to someone." He had no partner. He found one within 30 seconds. He did not look back. The second waltz. Margaret approached a tall boy named Andrew Davis. Andrew rubbed his wrist. "Sprained it in lacrosse, ma'am. So sorry." He danced the next song with a redhead from Spartanburg. The third. A boy named Christopher Taylor said his phone was buzzing, his grandmother very important, and stepped onto the terrace where he did not, in fact, take any call. The fourth. A boy named Henry Anderson smiled apologetically and said, "Next song, I promise, Mrs. Ashford." There was no next song for him with Savannah. By the 5th refusal, the whispers had started. A woman at table 9 leaned to her husband. "Look away, don't make it worse." A girl Savannah had once tutored in Latin held a napkin to her mouth to hide a giggle. Headmaster Gregory Wilson, who had been invited as a courtesy donor guest, set down his glass and pretended to study the orchestra. Coach Moore, there as Wesley's chaperone, felt his jaw lock. Margaret was crying now, silently, behind Savannah's chair. Savannah's hands had gone bone white on the armrests. She stared down at the silver hem of her gown and willed herself not to break in front of 400 people. "Just one waltz, sweetheart, just one." Her mother's voice from that afternoon kept playing in her head, the way a song you don't want to remember plays. Then Trevor Hamilton walked in. He had been late on purpose. He wore a $3,000 Tom Ford tuxedo, custom cut. His father, Senator Charles Hamilton of South Carolina, was at table 1, deep in conversation with a defense contractor. Trevor scanned the room, saw Savannah at the edge of the floor with her crying mother behind her, and his mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. Trevor had dated Savannah for 9 months before the accident. He had visited her twice in the hospital, once with flowers, once with a teddy bear, and then he had stopped. He had stopped because his friends teased him. He had stopped because his father said quietly, "Son, a Hamilton doesn't carry dead weight." He had stopped because he was 18 and a coward, and he did not know yet that cowardice has a way of arriving at its own ballroom, eventually dressed in a tuxedo. He raised his champagne flute. The light caught the rim. 5 of his lacrosse teammates gathered around him like satellites. He spoke loud, pitched deliberately to carry to the orchestra and back. Why would any man here waste a dance on half a cripple in a wheelchair? A laugh broke, then another. Then 6. Look at her, boys. A broken doll nobody returned to the store. Cat got your legs? Savannah did not move. She did not lift her head. A single tear traced the line of her jaw and disappeared into the silver collar of her gown. Margaret pressed both hands over her mouth and made a small, wounded sound, the kind a mother makes only once in her life and never forgets. Harrison Ashford rose halfway from his chair at table 1. His wife caught his wrist. "Harrison, not in front of everyone, please." He sat back down. His knuckles whitened around the stem of his glass. Headmaster Wilson did not move. The 2 governors did not move. The wife of the Supreme Court Justice did not move. 400 of the wealthiest people in 3 states held their drinks at chest height and watched a paralyzed 18-year-old girl be publicly destroyed at her own birthday ball. And not a single one of them stood up. At the far end of the room, beside a champagne fountain shaped like the Ashford family crest, a tall, thin black boy in a borrowed tuxedo set down the bottle he was holding. He removed his white serving gloves. He folded them very carefully and placed them on the silver tray. Coach Moore across the room met his eye. One small nod. Go. Wesley Williams started walking. Wesley crossed the longest 40 feet of his life. The orchestra was still playing, a soft Chopin nocturne the conductor had chosen to fill the silence after Trevor's laughter. But every guest at every table turned their head as he passed, one after another, like wheat bending in a wave. A countess lowered her champagne. A surgeon leaned forward. Nobody knew what they were watching. They only knew they were watching something. Trevor stepped into the aisle, blocking the path, his lacrosse buddies fanning out behind him. "Where do you think you're going, busboy?" Wesley did not stop. He stepped around Trevor the way a river steps around a rock. Trevor's hand shot out and caught his elbow. "I asked you a question, boy." Wesley looked down at the hand on his elbow, then up into Trevor's eyes, and for the first time that night, something in Trevor's face flickered. The small animal warning a man gets when he has touched something he has misjudged. Trevor let go. Wesley kept walking. He reached Savannah's wheelchair and knelt. Not bowed, not stooped, but lowered himself to her exact eye level, the way a man kneels at an altar. Margaret stepped back, hands pressed to her mouth. "My name is Wesley Williams. I work the kitchen at Bellwood. I'm sorry for what they said, for all of it." Savannah did not lift her head. Her tears made dark spots on the silver silk over her knees. "Miss Ashford, may I have this dance?" It came out so gentle, so absent of pity, that her head came up slowly as if pulled by a string she had forgotten she still had. Her eyes, green, ringed in red, met his. "I know what they said about your legs. They were wrong. 12 hospitals were wrong. Your spine is not the prison they told you it was. I can feel it from here." He paused. "But before I prove that, I'd like to be the first man tonight who treats you like a woman, not a diagnosis. Will you give me one dance?" Margaret made a small breaking sound behind the chair. Savannah's lower lip trembled. Then her right hand, the one that always shook from disuse, lifted from the armrest, slowly, like something rising from deep water. She placed it in his. "Yes," she whispered. A gasp moved through the front tables. Trevor laughed, but the laugh came half a beat too late and a beat too thin. "This should be hilarious," he muttered. None of his friends laughed with him. Headmaster Wilson stood. "Now wait just a moment." Coach Moore placed a single hand on his shoulder. "Gregory, sit down." "Lawrence, I cannot allow—" "Sit down. You are about to see something you'll tell your grandchildren about." The headmaster sat. Wesley turned his head toward the orchestra. He raised 3 fingers, slowly just above the chair, and held them in a small, polished gesture the conductor had not seen executed in person since Vienna, 2014. Jeffrey Brown's baton froze midair. His face went white. He looked at the boy. He looked at the wheelchair. He looked back at the boy. And very slowly, Jeffrey lowered his baton and whispered 3 German words to his musicians. The Chopin stopped. The violins lifted. A long, sweet, perfectly tuned A rose into the chandeliers and hung there like a promise. At table 4, an 81-year-old woman in an emerald gown set down her cane and rose to her feet. Her name was Madame Eleanor Brooks. She had not danced in 14 years. She had not been seen standing in public in 3. She pressed her hand to her chest, her eyes locked on the boy kneeling beside Savannah Ashford's wheelchair, and whispered to no one, "It can't be." Wesley placed his right hand lightly behind Savannah's shoulder. His left hand stayed in hers. He did not look at the room. He looked only at her. "Trust me 1 minute, Miss Ashford. Just one." And the first chord of Tales from the Vienna Woods rolled across the parquet floor of Ashford Manor. The opening bars of Strauss filled the ballroom, but Wesley did not begin a waltz. He began an examination. His right hand, resting behind Savannah's shoulder, slid 1 inch lower along the silver gown. Then another inch. His fingertips found the small, hidden ridge where her dress closure ran along her spine, and through that thin layer of silk, his hand began to read her body the way another man might read a page of Braille. She felt his fingers stop. Press. Release. Move. "What are you doing?" she breathed. "Listening." His thumb settled at the base of her rib cage and walked, vertebra by vertebra, downward. T10. T11. T12. L1. He paused at L1 for 3 full seconds. His jaw tightened. He counted the rotation in the bone beneath his thumb. 4 millimeters left of center, 8 degrees of axial twist, and then he traveled lower, fingertips light as moth wings, along the path of the sciatic nerve where it exited the lower spine and ran down into the muscles she could not feel. He felt the ropey, fibrotic tissue gripping that nerve like a fist that had never opened. He closed his eyes for 1 heartbeat. He opened them. "Miss Ashford, I need to tell you 3 things, and I need you to listen to all 3 before you answer me. Okay? 1. Your spinal cord is intact. It always has been." She made a small sound like a breath catching on glass. 2. The L1 vertebra above your injury rotated when you fell from the horse. It locked into a position that compressed the dura around the sciatic nerve root. Over 24 months, the surrounding ligament has fibrosed, scarred, around that compression. 12 surgeons read the MRIs and saw a paralyzed cord, because that's what they expected to see. Nobody examined the rotation. Her hand had gone cold in his. 3. I can fix it. Tonight, in this room, in about 3 minutes, if you will trust me. Behind the wheelchair, Margaret Ashford had heard every word. She stumbled forward and gripped the back of the chair to keep from collapsing. Sir, who are you? What are you saying to my daughter?" Wesley did not look up. His eyes stayed on Savannah's. "Ma'am, I'm asking your daughter's permission, not yours, not the headmaster's, not anyone else's in this room. Hers." From across the ballroom, Harrison Ashford was already in motion, weaving between tables, his face the color of old paper. "Stop! Stop this! Margaret, get away from her!" "Harrison!" The voice that stopped him was old and trembling and unmistakable. Madame Eleanor Brooks had crossed half the room on her cane. She caught Harrison's sleeve with a hand spotted by 81 winters. Harrison, look at his hands. Eleanor, look at his hands.
Harrison looked.
Wesley's right hand was still resting along his daughter's spine, and the fingers were not pressing wildly, not searching. They were placed, each fingertip on a precise anatomical landmark. Index finger on the L1 spinous process, middle finger 2 vertebrae down, thumb cradling the iliac crest. The hand of a man who had been doing this since before he could read.
Eleanor's voice cracked.
Harrison, I trained under the best spinal manipulators alive for 40 years. I have never seen a hand find an L1 rotation through a ball gown in under 30 seconds. Let him work. Eleanor, my daughter is not a... Then ask her, Harrison, not me, her.
Harrison turned to Savannah.
His mouth opened, closed. He had spent $32 million and 24 months trying to find an answer. And the answer, if it was an answer, was kneeling on his ballroom floor in a borrowed tuxedo, holding his daughter's hand. Savannah, he said. His voice broke on her name. Baby, whatever you want.
She looked at Wesley.
The tears had stopped. Something else had taken their place. A small, terrible flame Margaret had not seen in her daughter's eyes since the morning of the fall. Do it, Savannah whispered. Wesley nodded once. I need you off the chair, Miss Ashford, face down. We can use that chaise.
The chaise long was 8 feet away,
a velvet antique upholstered in deep blue. Wesley slid one arm beneath Savannah's knees, the other beneath her shoulders, and lifted her with the spinal alignment of a surgical orderly who had done the lift 1,000 times. He laid her face down on the chaise, smoothed the silver gown over her legs with quiet respect, and turned to the room. I need everyone behind the table line, now. No phones, no flashes.
Nobody moved.
Coach Moore stepped forward and said one word, low and clear. Move. 400 people moved. Wesley knelt beside the chaise. He laid his palms flat on Savannah's back. Miss Ashford, the first step does not hurt. It will feel warm. The second step will feel like pins and needles. The third step will be one sharp sound. After that, we will know. Wesley? Yes. What if you're wrong? He was quiet for a long second.
Then we will have lost 3 minutes.
And you will be exactly where you were before I walked across this room, and I will spend the rest of my life apologizing. But Miss Ashford, his voice dropped, I am not wrong. He found the 3 points along the sciatic pathway. He pressed each one. He held each for 7 heartbeats, counting on her pulse beneath his palm. 3 gates release, his mother had called it. 3 doors that have been locked too long. On the 7th heartbeat of the 3rd gate, Savannah gasped. I feel heat. Wesley, I feel heat. Margaret broke down completely. She fell to her knees beside the chaise, gripping her daughter's hand, sobbing without sound. Harrison stood over them, frozen, one tear cutting silently down his face. Trevor Hamilton, somewhere behind the line of tables, made a noise in his throat. This is rigged. This is some kind of trick. Nobody turned to look at him. Nobody had to. Wesley positioned his hands, the right palm flat over L1, the left forearm braced beneath Savannah's lower ribs. Breathe in, now out, now empty, on 3. 1, 2, 3. The sound that came from Savannah's spine was small, clean,